joining us with her thoughts. Nina Schick, policy advisor at think tank Open Europe. Nina, thanks for joining us. When you look at the coalition agreement on Europe, it sort of reinforces what appears to be a standoff with France. The European Commission should not be deciding on the winding up of banks. It should be another body. The European Stability Mechanism, the ESM, should not be available for closing banks. Merkel's moving away from a deal that allowed the ESM to directly recapitalise. Taxpayers should be shielded from costs tied to failing banks, and a rejection of all forms of debt mutualisation within the Eurozone.
So the fundamental question is whether or not we would see a decisive deepening of Eurozone integration with the new German government. And this agreement shows that the answer to that, Ross, is no, we won't see that. As you mentioned, there will continue to be German foot dragging on banking union. The draft agreement, which we saw yesterday actually, had very little detail on banking union, which is a surprise because we know that that has been a big topic of discussion between the SPD and Angela Merkel's CDU-CSU. Now, there will have to be some kind of decision made on there. Specifically, the draft agreement had nothing on resolution funds. So with the important banking union negotiations coming up, Germany will have to make a decision there, and it could very much define how the Eurozone ends up going. Now, another interesting point in this is that what we see Angela Merkel insisting upon, her party insisting upon, which she actually floated in the lead up to the election, is the idea of reform contracts. So that troubled Eurozone countries will have to agree to legally enforceable structural reforms in return for aid for their economies.
Yes, how's that going down in Paris and Rome?
Well, probably not very well. This was also something that Merkel floated at the recent European Council summit meetings, and she actually said that this had the consent of everybody. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But when it comes to Germany, they have a lot of clout in the Eurozone, so these reform contracts could definitely become the next big thing in the Eurozone.
What's interesting is how comfortable Germany is becoming with the leader in Europe, and also what the reaction of the Latin bloc is going to be, and whether sort of France and Germany have always worked together. Are we going to see an interesting change in the political dynamic where maybe France starts siding more with Spain and Italy to sort of oppose Germany or the Northern Bloc?
Well, of course, this is one of the big fears for Germany, and this is also one of the reasons why Germany is so keen to ensure that the UK never leaves the EU, because they're terrified that they'd be outvoted by a southern, more protectionist bloc if that were the case. However, and also from meetings in the Kanzleramt in Berlin, I hear very often that France is a big worry in Germany. It certainly is, and this is something that
could be back in recession, and we don't know,
absolutely.
At this particular moment. Yeah.
France is definitely a worry for the Chancellery. There's no doubt about that.
You mentioned the UK. It's kind of interesting. How strong is Britain's negotiating position, bearing in mind what you've just stated about how Germans feel about the importance of keeping the UK in the EU?
Well, I think it's important not to underestimate how important the UK is to Germany and the EU. Certainly, number one, Germany is terrified, as I mentioned, of being outvoted by a protectionist bloc if the UK were to leave. You know, the entire coalition agreement is got references to how Europe has to become more competitive, open to trade, etc. So a more protectionist bloc dominating the EU would be counterproductive to that. Also, it's the second biggest contributor to the EU budget. So definitely the UK has more influence or clout than perhaps.
And I think Germany's biggest trading partner.
Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely.
Period. Yeah. I think the total goods traded, over 153 billion last year. Nina, good to see you. Thanks very much, Dee, for joining us. Nina Schick, policy advisor at Open Europe.